Hi everyone. My name is Rafael Rendon with the SAIU USWW Allied Entertainment Executive Board for South Division, and also shop steward for SEIU for DCA Day Custodial. I wanted to bring an update because we've had a few people asking about the Section 8 arbitration and how that's going. There's not much news on this front, so I don't envision this video really being that long, but I'll just kind of talk about some of the key points, what we've told the company, and where we are as far as that. Now, a lot of people have asked what is a Section 8 arbitration as far as the contract, what does that look like, what does that entail? And to kind of summarize, basically, I put up an update not too long ago that we had, as far as the union, won the Section 8 arbitration against the company, and they were ordered to sit down and bargain with the union as far as the impacts for some of the substantial changes that they've made to custodial. There are provisions in the union contract that specifically dictate that whenever a company, for instance, makes a large change, substantial change to either the operational workload, in this case, they changed the day custodial and third shift custodial workload. They've been changing them quite heavily and frequently, or even just changes or the creation of a new classification, for instance. In this case, they heavily, again, amended day custodial and third shift as far as changes and impacts and things like that. That whenever something like that happens, the union has every right to sit down and say, hey, for instance, we should look at getting a higher wage rate if there's going to be more work, that sort of thing. Um, and so we filed one of those because the company kept saying that they felt that they had not substantially changed day custodial and third shift, which we all know is simply not true, but that was their stance, and ultimately, most likely why they lost the arbitration. That and the fact that they kept saying that they just hadn't really changed anything at all, which was also not true. Um, Going from there, what happened was over a year we were in arbitration with them. I can personally say I testified somewhere around 12 to 14 hours for on behalf of the cast members. There were other people as well, and the arbitrator ultimately decided that the company was in the wrong and needed to sit down and ordered the company to sit down and bargain. Now, where we are right now is essentially we are pushing for uh, some sort of raise across the board for, you know, for all parties in custodial that were impacted. As far as where we are, though, the company is, of course, pushing back on that, and we are going back and forth. We've had about 4 dates of bargaining with them where we've met and had discussions. And so that's unfortunately where we are. There is nothing finalized at this time. We will continue to push our stance. They, of course, have the opportunity to voice their stance as well, and we go back and forth and see whether there's some progress to be made here, or whether ultimately we have to move to other options at that point. Also, some other key points we've, of course, relayed to the company are questions and inquiries regarding, for instance, why they felt these changes were necessary. It seemed kind of odd to us in bargaining because they were asking the union about some of these changes, and we had to turn around and say, hey, you need to talk to your management team because these plans came from your management teams. These came from upper management, executives, and so on. Um, a lot of the management team for like senior production managers, for instance, executives above senior production managers, third shift management, as far as the heads, and so on, as far as the transference of some of these jobs or the addition workload from day custodial. And we just had to basically reiterate to the company that these were changes that they made without consultation to the union, without asking for feedback. We kept telling them it wasn't going to work. And so we reiterated to the company during bargaining that they really need to go back to the team and ask them why they felt that these changes needed to be made, because it didn't make sense even from a financial standpoint where they had to spend quite a bit of money as far as update training, purchasing of equipment for people who had never done the job before, and so on. And we reiterated that every step of the way. We kept telling them, hey, you have people on layoff who could simply be called back to do the job. And that was always our stance. And unfortunately, as we told the company, they were the ones who disagreed with that assessment. They were the ones who felt that the operations needed to change so dramatically and drastically, and yet they don't seem to know why, or they just seem to not be willing to answer why. And that's why the arbitration, a lot of that information came out during the arbitration, as far as previous plans that they had had for these sorts of things. So that's another point that we have reiterated to them, that this does not seem like it was a random change, and yet they just don't seem to want to discuss the rationale behind it, even though this was their plan. Now, beyond that, there's simply just not that much information to put out this time because, again, nothing's finalized, which means that the impact is not finalized as far as, uh, wage adjustments, etc., that we'd be pushing for. However, what I can say is potentially some of the things and questions that either the company's been asking or we've just been pushing for, or reiterating to the company. For instance, how heavily they've changed the classifications, how heavily they've impacted hours of operation, or um, workload, job duties, that sort of thing. And we've been constantly detailing that to them. Some of the questions the company has, of course, asked are if they could, for instance, get some assistance from the union with understanding why we are pushing for raises at this time unilaterally. Um, and we kind of look at that as that's pretty self-evident. But for the most part, we've just been voicing to them that we find it kind of odd. And I know I voiced it personally. I found it kind of odd that the company would try to challenge some sort of raise when they can't even, quite frankly, tell us what your guys' job is. Seems that either they don't know or they don't want to answer as far as your job duties, what they've changed, who does the work that they've changed, the extent of those changes, what changes they're planning in the future, and so on. And I kind of told them it seems odd to us. Maybe they can help us understand on that front how they feel they would ever, for instance, argue in a bargaining um, that you guys don't deserve a raise, as far as all custodial that were impacted by the shift of and transference of the work of third shift, day custodial, and so on, and just the overall excessive changes to operational workload, job duties, and so on, when they can't even answer what your job is. It's a very odd argument, but it seems to be the company's argument in certain stances. Beyond that, though, again, there's simply just not that much to relay. Yes, they did lose the arbitration. Yes, the arbitrator then ordered them to sit down and legally force them to go to the bargaining table with the union, and that is where we are. We've had, again, 4 meetings with them through mostly August, and that is roughly where we are, as we are pushing for raises. They have some of their own questions or things that they would like, and we basically engaged in bargaining as far as what the impact of this looks like, what it potentially might be worth, and so on, any adjustments to the classification, that sort of thing. As far as if anything gets finalized, we will of course share it. We will then of course include the impacts for who would be impacted, how, why, that sort of thing. Some of the other things we are pushing for is for them to be a little clearer on what the job duties are of all of you, because it seems like they continuously just change or amend the job on the fly, and it's concerning to the union, and from what we've heard when we were surveying a lot of youth as cast, especially cast who were impacted. Even I was impacted myself as a member of DCA Day Custodial, for instance, and having gone through a lot of these changes as well firsthand. It's kind of concerning, and we've voiced that concern that they don't seem to be able to simply give you guys a list of hey, this is what you do, this is where you pick up, this is where you leave off, and so on. So that is where we are right now. If there are any other questions, feel free to ask. But again, this one's unfortunately pretty straightforward, and the bargaining simply is not done. Bargaining can change and go into flux on a regular basis. So again, nothing is finalized, but they have been ordered by the arbitrator again to sit down and bargain with us over the substantial changes that did occur, and that is where we are. If there are any further updates, I will let you guys know, and you guys have a good night.